From Evoke Media, I'm Sabrina Mirage Naeem. With me is Cassia Binkowski, and this is Breaking Glass, a series of conversations with women around the world who are shattering glass ceilings and challenging social norms. They are audacious, gutsy, and their stories are echoed across borders and generations in a rallying cry that is changing the narrative for women everywhere. We're having a really global conversation today with business partners Carly Burson and Preeti Pugalia. Carly is based in Texas and is the founder of ethical fashion brand Laud the Label. Preeti is the founder of Craft Boat, a recycled paper and textile manufacturing studio in Jaipur, India, deeply committed to encouraging sustainable Indian craftsmanship. Since its founding in 2015, Craft Boat has partnered with brands in the US, France, and India, and now works with over 4,000 artisans on the ground. Laud the Label, meanwhile, works with more than 500 artisans in Guatemala, Honduras, Haiti, India, and Peru, with the mission of creating real living wages for its workers and combating global poverty, an issue which disproportionately impacts women around the world.
Sabrina, collectively, these women are working to disrupt the traditional fashion supply chain by producing timeless products while creating meaningful economic opportunities for thousands of women. We bounce all over the place in today's conversation because these women are simply on fire. We're talking about the injustices of the orphan crisis around the world, the oppressive poverty that far too many women are living under, the immigration crisis here in the United States, and the ripple effect that a living wage can have on a woman's life. We are wildly impressed to see how Carly and Preeti's work is touching each of these areas of impact in really meaningful ways. Take a listen.
Good morning and good evening. Carly and Preeti, you both are joining us from different parts of the world, but we're excited to have a conversation where you intersect with your work, with your passions. Carly joining us from Texas and Preeti from Jaipur, India. Thank you both for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Sabrina.
So there are quite a few topics we want to touch on today, and to the extent that honestly, I don't even know how we'll get through this conversation in less than the time that we have, but we'll do our best. So we want to start with the story that you, Carly, have already shared publicly, but for the purposes of this conversation, given it's very relevant to our focus of women's issues, we'd be remiss not to ask you about it. Take us back to the adoption of your daughter. What originally drew you to adopt, and what shifted for you after that experience?
Yeah, whenever I share the story of why I chose to start an ethical fashion brand, it always goes back to really the personal experience of adopting my first daughter, Ellie. At the time, I was working in traditional fashion and had a job that I really viewed to be my dream career, working for a company I never envisioned leaving. But when my husband and I were finalizing our daughter's adoption, she's from Ethiopia, we were spending a great deal of time in her home country. Her adoption process was fairly complicated, and it required us being in country for many months. So within that time, we spent a lot of time in the children's home that she grew up in, and witnessed visiting hours. I would say I really kind of, everyone has an aha moment. And for me, it was definitely witnessing birth parents coming to visit their children in an orphanage and recognizing and seeing how loved and wanted those children were, but they were not able to be home with their families because of poverty. And it just made me realize that, adoption, though it's important and there are many children that need homes, it's really just a Band-Aid for a much bigger issue. Really the leading cause of child relinquishment is poverty. And I think in the Western world, we view it as war and death and other reasons that birth parents aren't able to raise their children, even that parents maybe don't want their children. And that's just not the reality of what the orphan crisis looks like. So once we adopted Ellie, I just felt like I needed to do something that would honor her birth mother, really recognizing that I was working in an industry that perpetuates poverty all over the world. Garment workers it employs mostly all women. It's the leading industry for women worldwide, but it's an industry that holds women in poverty, and it's an industry that actually takes women away from their children. So I ended up leaving my fashion career and decided to start what is now Laud the Label, really just wanting to be a part of keeping families together, giving women the opportunity to take care of their children, giving women the opportunity to make their own choices, giving the women the opportunity to recognize that they're worthy of a paying job and to work in a space where they're safe and they're respected and they're valued, and that they would have children at home watching them go off to work every day and recognizing that power and that worth within their mother. So, you know, gosh, it was 7-8 years ago. It started as a really small kind of side hustle where we employed 5 to 6 jewelry makers in Honduras. And in the last 7 years, we've expanded into 6 countries and now employ over 536 artisans worldwide.
That's incredible, and I'm very excited to get into Laud the Label a little bit more in a minute. But there's so much that I want to unpack with what you just said, and I think that it's important to acknowledge that what you're saying is right about the misconception, maybe in Western countries, but I'm assuming also in other places, that adoption exists. The idea of adoption exists because there are children out there who are orphans, or who their parents don't want them, or, you know, all of these things. And it's like, that's the acknowledgement that that's not always the case, and that in fact, most of the time that's not the case. And I'm curious just how, for you personally, you were able to reconcile that period of your time where being able to adopt Ellie, my assumption is that that was a highlight of your life, that she is a joy for you, but that it comes with such complicated baggage, knowing that she or other children out there do have parents that otherwise would want them, or would want to keep them and hold on to them. And because of the poverty that exists in this world, they don't have that choice, that they don't have that option. How were you able to kind of personally navigate the complexities of those feelings of being on both sides of that understanding?
Yeah, that's a really amazing and great question that I don't get asked often. I think the adoption community focuses too much on adoptive parents and the joy of bringing a child into your home. But I've always viewed it as, you know, Ellie is one of the greatest gifts and greatest joys of my life. But what was my greatest gift was another woman's greatest tragedy. And I think that we have to really recognize that in adoption. It's definitely not something I've ever reconciled with. I think if there's a day where that makes sense to me, then I've sort of lost the magnitude of the issue. I have an older daughter. She's now 21. And she, we're hearing a lot on the news right now about refugee children at our border fleeing from Latin American countries. And she was one of those kids that was held in a detention facility. She was only 15 years old. She was pregnant with her daughter, my now granddaughter. And I never not think about when we get to experience happy moments in our life, and when I get to have, be a part of my granddaughter's birthday parties, and when I got to watch my daughter graduate from high school and then graduate from a medical program and get her first job, I never stopped thinking about her mother back in Guatemala, and that it's such injustice that I'm the one that gets to be a part of all of these things, when her wonderful mother in Guatemala that raised her, quite frankly, to be the incredible human that she is, if it weren't for poverty, if it weren't for systems of injustice, she would be experiencing all of these things alongside of her. So I think our story, our family story is filled with a lot of joy and a lot of gratitude, but it started from a place of tragedy, and it started from a place of injustice, and we just don't ever forget it. We don't ever reconcile with it. For us, it's about trying to change it